Hello everyone and welcome to SwitchUp. In today's video we've got one of our physical games episodes for you. This is the series where I show you some of the games I have picked up physically for the Switch in the last few months. We'll have a look at whether there's any mandatory updates needed onto your system storage, have a look at the box art, see if anything comes inside with it, and then I'll give you a mini review of sorts based on my initial impressions of the game. I've tried to pick a selection of games from different genres, price points and regions with a couple of imports in here to show you too, and hopefully it will give you a better idea of what's available out there and where you can get it from. Now very quickly before we start, after the 10 games there will be a bonus feature of a hardware review for a product that might interest some of you. It's not sponsored, it's nothing like that, it's just a review like we do with games all the time, but because it's not Switch specific, I didn't want to do it as a separate video and therefore thought that a place in a video about physical media would be the best fit, so please do stay around for that. Okay, what have I been picking up, how much did it cost, and was it worth it? Well, let's find out. The first game I have to show to you today then is Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl. This was actually a present from my wife, an unexpected one, she just came home with it one day, which was very nice of her, and it is a fighting game very much in the style of Super Smash Bros. Now I'm quite a traditionalist when it comes to fighting games. I love my one-on-one fighters, no items, a health bar each and up to 3 rounds, but I do appreciate the more hectic nature of Smash Bros, and whilst not a fan of Nickelodeon in and of itself, we didn't have the channel itself easily available here in the UK when I was growing up, but I am a massive fan of the Ninja Turtles, which is now owned by Nickelodeon, and I also used to love Ren and Stimpy, which I would watch as a kid on Channel 4. The biggest issue with the game is one that exists in all of the recent Nickelodeon based games, such as the 2 kart racers also on the Switch, and that is that once again there is no voice acting. It just makes each of these games feel so devoid of charm and the humorous elements that these characters should emit. Still, the actual battling is solid and it's fun to play as Powdered Toast Man whilst my daughter played as April O'Neil, but if you do have Smash Brothers and no real love for these characters then you don't really need this game. If you have any nostalgia for the characters included though, and a willingness to overcome some shortcomings, it might well be worth considering.
Major damage! Finish! The results are in, and the winner is Leonardo!
The next one was one that no doubt many people bought, and that is Pokemon Legends Arceus. Now I've said a number of times that I'm by no means a Pokemon fan, and I rarely buy games on launch day these days, but this one intrigued me enough to do so, plus my daughter is a big fan and we've been playing through it together. On the whole, I've very much enjoyed it so far. I'm about 10 hours in and just recently beat the second frenzied Pokemon. I like the new catching aspect in terms of crafting your own Pokeballs, being able to catch the Pokemon unaware or engaging in more traditional battles, and I also like the little touches such as the Pokedex being a handwritten book to tie into the fact that this is of course a prequel. My biggest gripe is the amount of popping that occurs as you explore the land. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not all for graphics, I don't really care usually, but it does irk me that this is of course a Nintendo published game of an IP that makes them a lot of money, and I just expected a higher level of polish than that. Having said that though, that does become irrelevant when you are playing it with your child and you see the awe and wonder on their face as the Pokemon go about in the wild and your character tracks them through the long grass. It is definitely the freshener the series needed, and I do feel that if the recent announcement of the Generation 9 games go again in this style, which it looks like they may well do by the trailer, then there's definitely scope here to refine this formula further and make this something quite fantastic. The next game I bought was the Tasmanian Tiger, which is a 3D platformer that first came out during the GameCube, PS2 and original Xbox era. Now I never played it back in the day and I've been very pleasantly surprised actually by how well it holds up. It follows a similar sort of formula to things like Mario 64 in that you have a hub world and can then access levels from here, and you must then gather a certain amount of the game's main collectible found within these stages to unlock further levels. You can upgrade your boomerang as you go and the game runs at a solid 60 frames per second. It took me a while to master Ty's movement, especially his glide feature, but it does control very well once you have this down pat. The graphics have that blocky look synonymous with the early 3D platformers, but the colour and vibrancy of the worlds make up for it, and it really does pop on the small screen, especially if you are playing on an OLED. I paid £25 for this just after Christmas as a little gift to myself, but it has dropped since then to about £15, which really is a bargain if you like your 3D platformers and want to boost your physical collection. Now there is a physical version that bundles this and its sequel together, but that sequel is a code in a box, which almost renders it useless to be honest, as the sequel has gone on sale a couple of times already on the eShop, so buying this version of the first game and getting the second one on there is probably a much more cost effective way of going about things. I also picked up Cruis'n Blast, a game I reviewed last year and absolutely loved and wanted to add to my physical collection. It recently dropped to £25 on Amazon, which seemed the right time to buy it, and for anyone who hasn't played it, it's an arcade racer in every sense of the word. It first released in arcades in 2017 before being brought to the Switch in 2021. The Switch version has the 5 tracks from the arcade original, as well as a further 24, although it is important to say that most of these tracks do recycle assets from those 5 original tracks. Even with this in mind though, this game is just so much fun. There are a huge amount of vehicles to unlock, ranging from the sublime to the ridiculous, and eventually you'll be using unicorns and dinosaurs to race about with. The racing itself is all about beating the other cars by hundredths of a second. Crashing doesn't lead to huge penalties, in fact you'll smash through most obstacles, and it's just about high octane racing. Some people might hate this as it keeps the cars together throughout and it's rare that you'll ever pull away, but the short tracks and the intense finishes make it a very different and very welcome alternative to the races that we already had on the Switch. This next game is a Japanese import and it is the NAMCOT Collection. Not to be confused with the 2 Namco Museum archive bundles that came to the West digitally or as codes in boxes. This is the version Japan got with different games included and a proper physical release. Some of the games featured here are pretty standard. You have NES versions of Pac-Man and Galaga, for example, plus games like Tower of Druaga, which are on a lot of other collections, and there's a game called Family Jockey, which is a betting simulation game that's very hard to play without an understanding of Japanese. Away from these though, there are some really interesting games, some of which are also available on one of the 2 Western collections, and some are exclusive to this Japanese version. Pause it here if you want to see the full list of games on the collection, but there are a nice mix such as shoot 'em up Dragon Spirit, puzzle game Quinty, and platformer Yokai Dachuki, as well as 2 fantastic games in Splatterhouse Wanpaku Graffiti, which is the game pretty much I bought the collection for. It's a cutesy Splatterhouse game which was on the Famicom. Plus there is also an NES style version of the brilliant Pac-Man Championship Edition game that came out a few years back. As a physical collector, I do have a bit of a subset going on of compilations of older console or arcade games, so I wanted this to add to that, but there are easier ways to get most of these games for your Switch than this particular release. I got this from Amazon, which had import fees included. The actual game itself is cheaper to buy via Play Asia, but as there was nothing else I wanted and without knowing what the import fees would have been, I plumped to get it with an all-in fee and know what I was paying from the start. We do have links to Play Asia though if you do want to get yourself this or any other games of course. You'll get 5% off of your order if you use the link in the top pinned comment and the code SUP2022. Next is a game that I've included due to how cheap it was, just to give a bit of variety in the prices that are available out there. It's called Street Power Football and it was £7.99 from a website called base.com. Now I bought this because I am a football fan of course, but more so because when it comes to video games based on the sport, I love indoor 5-a-side no stoppages type of matches. To this day, the best game I've ever played for this was actually the indoor mode in FIFA 98 Road to World Cup, and I've yet to play a game that does it as well as that game did. Well, unfortunately this isn't going to take that crown anytime soon. Well, I say that actually it might do, but I'll never know about it, and the reason for this is that you cannot actually play the football matches anyway but online. The single player mode is just a number of tricks and skill shots that you can attempt for points, which was a massive disappointment. Now it does say on the box that online is required, but I did assume that this meant you needed the online subscription to play online matches. Maybe that's my mistake for making an assumption, but it is a sad state of affairs when single player content is non-existent in games these days. A massive disappointment for me this one, even at the cheap price. Now this one I'd had my eye on for a while, but as always, there's always a biting point for me for how much I'll spend on a particular game, and for this game it was £15. Well, by the time I'd picked it up it had actually fallen just below this, and I got Darksiders Genesis for just £12.99. This is different to the other games in the Darksiders series in that it's played from a top-down perspective and probably most resembles the classic dungeon-based ARPGs like Diablo, where you gain loot and slash your way through hordes of enemies. You play as the fourth horseman, Strife, although you can switch to war at any point, and the game is also playable in local or online co-op with both characters. The combat is nice and fluid, with each character having a different moveset, one having more range than the other, and switching between them is fun. I can see this keeping my interest through to completion, which is quite rare these days with the number of reviews we have to do. It means that games played in leisure time really do need to make a good impression quickly for the cartridge to stay in the console. It was developed by Airship Syndicate, who have a couple of other Switch games to their name in Battle Chasers Night War and the recent Ruined King, a League of Legends story, and to be fair, all three games are actually pretty good, which is not a bad track record at all. Now this one was only initially available physically from limited run games before getting a wider standard release, and that is Blasphemous. This is a rock hard Metroidvania that I reviewed back in the day, and I always wanted a physical release of it, so it's nice to finally have one, and even better due to the fact that I got it for a very good price. It cost me just £17.99 from Game. This is the deluxe edition, which comes with some stickers, a map, codes for both a digital soundtrack and a comic, as well as a couple of extra character skins. It has a beautifully macabre pixel art style to it, and as I mentioned earlier, most definitely puts up a challenge, but it is very rewarding as you start to make progress. For the price I got it for, it's actually cheaper than the base price on the eShop, excluding any sales of course, and having said this, it does go on sale digitally at times, so it is definitely another option if you're not as bothered about a physical release. Just to say quickly as well that any of the games I featured today that we have reviewed previously on the channel, I will put links to those reviews in the top pinned comment if you want the full story. Next is a big game, a game I loved when we did review it on the channel, and I wanted to get the physical version, and that is Shin Megami Tensei 5. Now this had actually become quite difficult to find for a reasonable price, with most places either not stocking it at the moment or selling it for north of £50. This, as you can see, is a North American version, not because it was necessarily cheaper, but because it was the only one that Amazon had in stock for some reason. It was beginning to look as if this was going to go the way of Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3, in that because it is published by Nintendo in Europe, not only would it hold its value, but it would become a bit harder to find and a bit more expensive to obtain. However, it seems to have levelled out around the £45 mark recently and is readily available again at the moment. It was published by Sega in North America, not Nintendo themselves, which might negate that issue in that region completely anyway. The game itself is fantastic fun. It's of course a turn-based RPG where you recruit demons to your team, and you can then fuse demons together to make new ones and transfer new skills to your main character. This really adds an interesting dimension to gameplay that made it one of my favourite games of last year, and I'm very happy to now have it in my collection. And the final game was a pickup from CEX, and it is called Shining Resonance Refrain. This is what's called the Draconic Launch Edition, and as you can see it comes with a cardboard slipcover and a steel case of sorts. As you'll see here, the game itself slides inside it rather than it being an actual steel book. There is a regular edition that you can get, which is just the game case itself without the other bits shown. Now before moving on to the game itself, I want to have a quick word about the shop CEX, and if you are in the UK, no doubt you'll be familiar with them. They are one of those buy, sell, trade type shops that all countries have their own versions of, but what's worth bearing in mind about them is that they don't actually differentiate, price-wise between steelbook editions and regular editions of certain games. This cost me £20, which is about standard for the normal release, whereas this particular version goes for anywhere between £15 and £20 more than this on places like eBay. It is just worth keeping an eye out for steelbooks in there, as you might get yourself a bargain. Anyway, onto the game itself, and this is an ARPG which is actually considered a part of Sega's Shining series alongside things such as Shining Force. It first released as a Japanese exclusive for the PS3 in 2014 before the Refrain edition released a few years later worldwide. Battling is action based with combo attacks using your AP and force abilities your MP. Using both together in a good rhythm can allow you to chain moves together and deal some good damage. It's very similar combat wise to the Tales of series in fact, and on top of this, one of your characters can transform into a dragon owing to having a dragon spirit inside him, but the extra power is balanced by the dragon becoming more unstable as you use it. It's not a bad game. I would say I have played better ARPGs on the Switch, but I've enjoyed my few hours with it so far, and I am very happy to have this collector's edition in my Switch collection.
Impossible. That boy's a dragon?
So that's the 10 games, and as I said, we do have a little bonus feature for you now with a review of the Taito Egret 2 Mini. Again, as I said at the start, this is not sponsored, it's not an advert in this video. I just put it in here because it isn't Switch specific, so I didn't want to do a separate video, but it is about physical media, so it seemed to fit this video very well. The unit was provided to us though for review by United Games, so thank you for that. Now let's have a closer look. So the Egret 2 Mini is based on the Taito Egret 2 arcade machine from 1996, and it features 40 games starting with 1978's Space Invaders through to games released in the 1990s. It features a 5-inch LCD monitor with an aspect ratio of 4:3 and a resolution of 1024x768. The screen itself also has an interesting trick up its sleeve, and we'll cover this later in the video. The cabinet stands at just over 20 centimeters. As I said, there are 40 games included on the unit from Taito's arcade past. Highlights for me include Rastan, Bubble Bobble, Puzzle Bobble 2, Darius Gaiden, Kiki Kai Kai, Elevator Action Returns, and Rainbow Islands. One of the games on here, Dan Cougar, is listed as having never been released. Apparently it's a version of an update to Kaiser Knuckle, which was ultimately cancelled, but would have added boss characters, as you'll see when you play it here. All games feature save states and adjustable lives, plus a rapid fire option for the shooters. Now I can't think of anything obvious missing from the package, but I will list the full 40 games in the description if you are interested, so you can see exactly what it is you are getting. The emulation seems fine from the games I have played, and there is actually a HDMI port on the back of the cabinet so that you can connect it to your TV and play it on the big screen. All game footage you are seeing was captured this way. As well as that HDMI port, there is a port for headphones, as well as the main supply, which is actually a USB-C port, which is useful, and there are 2 USB controller slots, and we'll talk more about those in a bit. There isn't an actual volume slider on the unit itself, which personally I would have preferred, but you can adjust the volume to 5 different levels within the options in the menu. In terms of the design of the cabinet, it feels quite sturdy, perhaps a little more toyetic for want of a better word than I would have liked for my personal tastes, but it has a nice weight to it and it is aesthetically pleasing, matching the design of the original machine. The buttons and the stick are okay, again bearing in mind the scale of the machine. I don't know how much better they could have been, but they are certainly serviceable. The stick has both 4 and 8-way movement, and there are 6 action buttons. The stick did perhaps feel a little too twitchy at times for some games. I found myself moving up in games like Darius to avoid a bullet and smashing into the ceiling for example, whereas in other games like Space Invaders actually it was perfectly responsive. The buttons also feel a bit more rattly than clicky, but on the whole I did feel that they did the job perfectly well, to be fair. The part that I loved though was the fact that you can push the screen in, which then pops out of the unit slightly, allowing you to rotate it 90 degrees and play certain games in Tate or Tate mode. This is a very clever concept that was a nice surprise, and it makes playing games such as Space Invaders feel much more natural. I mentioned controllers earlier when talking about the ports on the back of the cabinet, and there are a few controller options that can be purchased separately, one with a stick and one resembling a more traditional console pad complete with a D-pad. These allow for 2-player mode and make playing on the big screen more comfortable, although you can use the unit itself as a controller when playing on the TV if you don't want to pay out for a separate controller. As well as these two though, the other option is a paddle and trackball controller, which is the one that we were sent as part of this review package. Paddles and trackballs were control functions that adorned some arcade cabinets of course and allowed for quicker and more precise movement in games that needed this, and if you do buy this controller it actually comes with a 32GB SD card that can slot into the side of the cabinet and contains 10 further games which require or at least are more effective with a trackball or paddle. These include Arkanoid and Strike Bowling. Price wise there are a few different options as it is available from both strictly limited games, most of which appear to be bundle versions with some extra bits and obviously the price reflects this, but there are more standard versions available from in-games via gamesrocket.com. The base price looks to be €199.99 or $229.99 excluding shipping, which I guess would equate to approximately £180. I don't have the official sterling price I'm afraid, so don't quote me on that, but I would guess it would be around that mark. I appreciate it does have some advantages over other mini consoles that we've seen over the past few years, such as being able to play it both as a standalone unit or hook it up to the TV, plus things like the screen and the monitor rotation mechanic would potentially push production costs up past some of those other mini systems, but I do think it is still a bit overpriced. Perhaps the 10 games from the paddle and trackball expansion set could have been on the base unit to add a bit more value to the price being asked, although I do appreciate then that without the optimum way to control these games, they probably would have been games you only experience once and then move on from. To conclude, I have enjoyed my time with the Taito Egret 2 Mini. It's a smart piece of kit that is pleasing to the eye as a display piece, but is comfortable enough to be a functional working unit despite its size. And of course it can plug into the TV if you'd rather play it that way. It is a mini unit of course, so bear that in mind as these can be a little difficult for some people to play, and I do feel that the stick is the weakest aspect of the machine while still being serviceable. We'll put links in the description if you are interested in picking one of these up. As I just said, there are a few different options available. They aren't affiliate links, we don't get anything for them, they're just there for your convenience to be honest, and I thought this might be a nice little bonus segment in our physical games episode just to let you know what is out there and whether it's actually decent. Thank you for watching this part and I hope you enjoyed what was our first ever hardware review. So there you have it then, another 10 games that I've picked up in the last few months. What did you think of the games I bought? Are they games that interest you? Do you own them already? If so, do you enjoy them? Please also put in your games that you've picked up recently. It's my favourite part of making these videos, reading in the comments what you've bought, where you picked it up from, how much it cost you of course, and if you would recommend it. Thank you if you did watch the extra part, the Taito Egret review. It's very much appreciated. It's the first hardware review I've ever done, so I hope you enjoyed it. And don't forget there is that link to Play Asia in the top pinned comment for 5% off of an order if you do want to grab yourself any imports. A quick thank you to our Patreons as always for your continued support, and to each and every one of you for watching our videos. Take care, and until next time, happy gaming.